You've talked a lot about constraints. I remember visualized value being like black and white, no images, just one typeface. Also, you've mentioned that if someone wants to get traction online, just pick a constraint and do it 100 times. What's your mental process to simplify a complex topic into an image or into a graphic?
So that the black and white constraint for visualized value was originally, there was a couple reasons I picked that. I think one was a pure contrast decision. So if you're scrolling through Instagram and you see these like hyper saturated lifestyle photos, the typical content that you see on Instagram, and then you're like confronted with this black square with like 50 white pixels on it. One of the initial decisions was that, just to interrupt the feed and kind of be a pattern interrupt, scrolling down these like high saturation photos typically. And then the second was trying to actually strip out a lot of the style, or like having this be able to absorb all different types of ideas from all different types of people. Like you want to make it kind of stylistically neutral in order to do that, almost like using a typewriter to write something. You have this very, very stripped back set of ingredients that you use. And then to the original question, the idea of how you take an idea and turn it into something visual is almost like turning it into an equation of sorts. So you read the language, and then hard to describe the process, but you can kind of separate it into these logical parts in a lot of cases. Or there are things like contrasting ideas in a sentence that will, try and create emphasis on a point, and that translates really well to visual. So you can play with things like contrast or scale, or these patterns actually that we all kind of understand to mean certain things, like an arrow, right? It's like the most understood, this set of symbols that transcend languages, that you don't need to necessarily read the quote in its native language to understand it. And one of the things that actually clicked further on down the journey in visualized value was kind of put this constraint on the idea where if I didn't put text on the image, and you just rely on basically Instagram's ability to translate the quote underneath, does that thing still map when you translate through different languages? So you really, really, really put the emphasis on the visual doing the communication, or at least adding context to the idea itself. And the final thing on that, like how I kind of stress tested those ideas. I was always look at it from like, what is the worst way that somebody could interpret this? Like, what is the least charitable way that somebody would look at this and like attack this idea? And that often just helps, just going through that feedback loop of feeling as though you can defend it from every angle that you can possibly think of. That's like the green light to post it. And that's mostly I do get back into that a little bit now, but I was doing that just so frequently, where I was putting like 5 or 6 out a day years and years ago. And they were all ideas that were helping me navigate some transition of my own at the time. So there were always like this personal feedback loop involved too.